Hey, welcome back to Between Two Torches, Splain that edition. I'm going to go over in this video just a top level explanation of glass blowing, different types of glass blowing, what I do, what do others do, what have I done, what can be used together, a few things like that. So glass blowing as an overall art includes many different sub-disciplines, which offhand glass blowing is kind of what you see performed at fairs, or if you're in this region, Dollywood, where you have, those glass artists, they have big, long stainless steel rods, they're dipping into a molten vat of glass, they're pulling it out, they have their blow tubes, it's a very grand operation. And then next to that, still under glass blowing, is lampworking, which is what I do. These torches, in the day when they were invented, they were called lamps. So hence the name lampworking, which is where we kind of do the opposite, where offhand glass artists, they start with a molten material. We start with a cold, solid rod of glass, and we melt it freehand. We're holding the glass with our hands, and we're freehand forming. We don't really use molds too much. Offhand people, they use molds quite a bit. I have a marble mold I use every once in a while, but overall I don't really think most lamp workers use a lot of molds. Then you have fusing or slumping, and that is basically where you have sheets of glass that you stack together and organize in certain ways inside of a fusing kiln. You take it up to above 2,000 degrees, and those pieces of glass will sort of fall down into the shape of the mold you have in the kiln. Or if you're fusing, you're completely fusing the glass layers together to create your piece of art. So I've done all of those to an extent. So underneath subcategories of lampworking, even you have soft glass workers, like your bead makers, where they're using a much thinner glass. When it gets hot, it's a much thinner. It's called the coefficient of elasticity, is that variable. Where borosilicate workers like myself, we use borosilicate glass, which has a coefficient of elasticity, or COE, of 33, which tells me it's a very viscous, thick glass. When it gets molten, it's very forgiving. You can shape it around. It cools off pretty slowly, so you don't really have to worry as much about the piece cracking on you if it cools too fast, or compared to other COEs. So soft glass, your bead makers, is a much more it's much more it takes a lot more patience because you're working with a glass that you have to slowly introduce into the flame, otherwise it'll pop off and shoot across the room, or the heat leaves the piece a lot sooner. So this is a coefficient of elasticity of between 90 and 104, I believe, for all soft glass. Yeah, so that's a whole different art. I dabbled in that in the beginning, and again I landed on borosilicate. COE 33 is my preferred medium. I don't have any beads laying around. I can find some later. I made about 8 years ago. But so anyway, this is sort of an example of something I made as one of my last things in the hot shop, or with otherwise known as with your offhand operation. So this is just I think the intention of this for me, it was going to be a lawn ornament where I would wrap iron around it and it would sit kind of in the lawn. That was 7-8 years ago, so it's still here. And so as far as slumping, the only thing I have around is this little dish, where basically I had it sitting on a little mold inside the kiln, and these pieces of glass and strips, they laid down, made like a candy dish type thing. Fusing, I still do a few batches a year, but basically this is your fused type pendant, where this dichroic back in there, I've experimented with different techniques of layering clear, multiple layers of dichro to get more of a dimensional look to these pieces. So you will see those in our shop. Then I've also done some stuff like this, which is basically a combination of lampworking and hot shop offhand work. These fish
were made in the hot shop, traditional offhand glass blowing. These other accents, they were made on my torch, and these layers of glass are just kind of called float glass. Basically the kind of glass you would see on tabletops, non-artistic glass, just kind of sheets of glass. I break it up and chip the edges and smooth down the sides to create this kind of stacked look. Mr. Tom Furman is the person, the only formal training I have in any kind of art at all is with offhand, and also this stacking technique. Tom Furman used to have a shop in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and I started working with him in, I think, probably 2012, and we worked together for about a year, and I decided to move on to lamp working. But in that time, you know, he was a fantastic teacher, and if you know Tom at all, you would absolutely recognize this style, because this is all kind of his typical layout you would see in his shop. And just to illustrate diversity with lamp working, we know all about these, don't we? And so there's also, I've made quite a lot of flowers for people over the years. Someone's wedding, I made, I think, 30 or 40 flowers to use as centerpieces for their tables. But anyway, so that's an overview of the different types of glassworking and what those different terms mean. And now when those terms are used in different videos or wherever you hear them, you can kind of have some context of where they go. Yeah, so next up is kilns and torches and everything else for lamp working. Stick around.